I fell off a ladder on a Tuesday morning in October, and the first thing I thought when I hit the ground wasn't about the pain. It was about whether I'd left the back door unlocked. That's the kind of man I am, 67 years old, still cleaning my own gutters, still thinking about practical things even when my body is lying sideways in the grass and my left hip is screaming at me in a language I've never heard before. The second thing I thought was, I need to call my daughter. Her name is Lorraine, and she lives 12 minutes from my house. I know the exact distance because I measured it once, back when her mother was sick and we were trading off care duties. 12 minutes. Close enough that I never worried, close enough that I thought, even lying there in the wet October grass with leaves sticking to my face, that everything would be fine. I was wrong about that. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My wife, Patricia. I still call her Patty even though she's been gone 4 years now. She used to say I was the kind of man who built things and broke things and never asked for help with either. She wasn't wrong. I spent 31 years as a structural engineer. I know how weight distributes. I know what holds and what doesn't. And I know, better than most, that the thing that looks solid from the outside can be completely hollow inside. I should have applied that knowledge to my own family. Lorraine is my only child. We had two, a boy stillborn before Lorraine came along. Patty and I never really talked about him. We folded that grief up small and put it somewhere quiet, the way people did in those days. And then Lorraine arrived, red-faced and furious, and we poured everything we had into her. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe it wasn't. I've gone back and forth on that 1,000 times in the last year, and I don't have an answer yet. What I can tell you is that Lorraine grew up smart, capable, and accustomed to getting what she wanted. Not spoiled. I want to be careful with that word. She worked hard in school. She went to a good college on a partial scholarship. She married a man named Holt, who sold commercial real estate and had a firm handshake and opinions about wine that I found exhausting. They have 2 kids, a boy and a girl, both teenagers now. On paper, Lorraine had everything, but in the last few years I'd started to notice cracks. Holt's business had bad quarters. There was talk of a second mortgage. Lorraine started calling more often, which I took as a good sign at first, until I realized that most of those calls eventually landed on the same subject: money. I helped when I could. That's what fathers do. A few thousand here, a loan there, money for the kids' tuition fund. I never kept a formal tally because it felt wrong, transactional, like I was running a ledger on my own daughter. Patty would have kept a tally. She had a clearer eye for things than I did. But Patty was gone, and I was alone in our house on Sycamore Road, and Lorraine was 12 minutes away, and that felt like enough. Then October came, and I fell off the ladder. The paramedics were kind, young. They always look impossibly young to me now, but professional and calm. They told me I had a fractured hip and 2 cracked ribs, and that I was lucky I hadn't hit my head. I didn't feel lucky. I felt like a man who had been too stubborn to hire someone to clean his gutters. They took me to Mercy General. I was in the ER for a few hours before they moved me to a regular room on the 3rd floor. And during all of that time, the pain, the x-rays, the forms, the questions about next of kin, I kept expecting to see Lorraine walk through the door. She didn't come. My neighbor, a retired postal worker named Gus, who has lived across the street from me for 22 years, came. Gus, who is 73 and has bad knees and no particular reason to be at a hospital on a Tuesday afternoon, drove himself over and sat with me for 3 hours. He brought a bag of pretzels from the vending machine because he didn't know what else to bring. And I've never been more grateful for pretzels in my life. Lorraine sent a text. Heard about the fall. Hope you're okay. Crazy week here. I'll try to come by soon. Love you. I read it 3 times. I kept thinking I must be misreading something. I wasn't. Try to come by soon. I was in the hospital with a fractured hip, and my daughter was going to try to come by soon. Gus saw me reading my phone. He didn't say anything. He handed me another pretzel. She came on the 4th day. By then, I'd had surgery, a partial hip replacement, which the surgeon explained in careful detail that I only half absorbed. I was on medication that made everything feel like it was happening behind glass. I was sleeping a lot. The nurses on the third floor knew my name and my coffee preference, and had started leaving the door slightly open during the day because I told them the closed door made me feel like I was already in a casket. There was one nurse in particular. Her name was Ada, who had a no-nonsense manner that reminded me of Patty. She didn't hover or flutter. She came in, did what needed doing, asked direct questions, and left. But she always knocked first, and she always looked me in the eye. And when I was having a harder day, she would pull up a chair for 30 seconds and just sit. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. Lorraine arrived on the fourth day, around 2 in the afternoon, dressed like she was coming from a lunch meeting, carrying a small, potted succulent that I suspect she bought in the hospital gift shop on her way in. She kissed my forehead. She looked around the room. She sat in the chair closest to the door, not the one Ada used to pull up close to the bed. "You look better than I expected," she said. "Better than you expected, based on what?" I asked. "You haven't seen me." She had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I know, Dad. It's been a difficult week." I asked her what had made it so difficult. She mentioned something about the kids' schedules, something about Holt's deal that was in a sensitive phase. I listened. I nodded. I did not say what I was thinking, which was, I have been lying in this bed for 4 days and you were 12 minutes away. Instead, I asked about the grandkids. She relaxed when the subject changed. She talked for a while about my grandson's lacrosse and my granddaughter's college applications. Normal things. Safe things. Then she set her purse on her lap and cleared her throat in a way that I recognized, a way she'd had since she was 17 and wanted something. "Dad," she said, "while you're recovering, and you're going to be here for a while, right? And then probably some rehab facility. Holt and I were thinking it might be a good time to talk about the house." I looked at her. "Sycamore Road," she said. "It's a lot of house for one person, especially now. The market is strong right now, and if you sold, you could move into something smaller, more manageable. Something on one floor. Or there's a really lovely, independent living community over in Westfield that we looked at." "You looked at it," I said. Holt drove by, just to see. "When?" She hesitated. "A few weeks ago." I let that sit in the air between us. "A few weeks ago." "Before the fall. Before the fractured hip. Before I was lying in a hospital bed for days without a visit." They had already been thinking about this. They had already been measuring. "Lorraine," I said very quietly, "I fell off a ladder 4 days ago." "I know, Dad. You weren't here." "Dad, I'm not saying it to make you feel guilty. I'm saying it because it's true, and because I think you should hear it said out loud." I kept my voice level. I had a lot of practice keeping my voice level. Structural engineers learn not to panic. "I'm not ready to talk about the house." She stayed another 40 minutes. She looked at her phone twice. When she left, she took the succulent with her. I think by accident, out of habit, just picking up everything she'd brought in. And I watched the door close, and I felt something shift in my chest that wasn't the cracked ribs. Ada came in an hour later. She took one look at me and pulled up the chair. "Bad visit?" she said. "My daughter wants to sell my house." Ada nodded slowly. She had the particular stillness of someone who has heard many things in hospital rooms and learned not to be shocked by any of them. "She came on day 4, I said. Ada nodded again. "Her mother would have been here in 20 minutes, I said. And then, to my own considerable embarrassment, I started to cry, not loudly. Just a quiet leaking, the kind that happens when you've been holding something very still for too long and your arms finally give out. Ada didn't make a fuss. She handed me a tissue and sat there until it passed. "You know," she said finally, "in this job, you learn a lot about people by who shows up." "And who doesn't," I said. "And who doesn't," she agreed. I had a lot of time to think over the next 2 weeks. That's the thing about a hospital. and then a rehab facility. They give you time you didn't ask for and can't escape. I lay in beds in 2 different institutions, and I thought about the last few years. The loans, the calls, the way Lorraine's visits had become shorter, and the conversations had become more tilted toward what I could do, what I had, what I might be willing to give. I thought about my estate, such as it was. The house on Sycamore Road was paid off. Patty and I had made the last payment together, a small celebration with cheap champagne and paper cups on the kitchen floor. There was a retirement account, a modest investment portfolio, the usual things a careful man accumulates over a working life. No fortune. But enough. More than enough for one person living quietly. I had a will. I'd drawn it up after Patty died, in a fog of grief, and I had not revisited it. Lorraine was the sole beneficiary and the executor. That had made sense at the time. It made less sense now. I also thought about Holt. Holt, who had driven past an independent living facility in Westfield before I had fallen off any ladder. Holt, who sold commercial real estate and therefore understood perfectly well the current market value of a 3-bedroom house on a corner lot in a desirable neighborhood. Holt, who had a firm handshake and wine opinions and a second mortgage and a wife who had not come to the hospital for 4 days. I thought about a lot of things. And then I made a phone call. My attorney's name is Sylvester. He's been my attorney for 19 years, since before Patty got sick, and he is the kind of man who listens more than he talks, which I respect enormously. I explained the situation to him from the rehab facility, lying in a bed with my leg propped up, speaking quietly so the man in the next room couldn't hear. Sylvester listened all the way through without interrupting. Then he asked a few precise questions. Then he said, "I think you should talk about a few options." We talked for an hour and a half. Over the following weeks, while I was in rehab, learning to walk correctly again, and doing exercises that made me feel like a toddler, and chatting with Ada when she was on shift, and once, memorably, beating Gus at chess over video call, Sylvester was putting things in order. The first thing we did was a new will. Lorraine was no longer the sole beneficiary. I restructured things carefully, thoughtfully, in ways that reflected what I actually valued. A portion went to my college alma mater's engineering scholarship fund. A portion went to the Regional Hospital Foundation, specifically earmarked for patient care on long-term recovery floors, the kind of floor where Ada worked. A portion went to Gus, because a man who shows up with pretzels when you need him deserves acknowledgement. And yes, Lorraine remained in the will. I'm her father. That didn't change. But everything became something. An executor became a professional trustee. The second thing was the house. I did not sell it, but I did something that Lorraine and Holt had not anticipated. I transferred it into a trust. The house would remain mine during my lifetime. After my death, it would go to a community land trust that builds affordable housing. The equity that Holt had been mentally calculating on his drive past the Westfield facility evaporated. The third thing was the power of attorney. Lorraine had assumed, she'd never asked directly, but I could tell she had assumed that she would be the one making decisions if I ever became incapacitated. I gave that authority to Sylvester and to my doctor jointly. People I trusted because they'd earned it, not because we shared DNA. None of this was done in anger. That's important to me. I've seen what anger does to men my age. It hollows them out, makes them mean, turns their remaining years into a long grievance. That wasn't what I wanted. I did all of this clearly, calmly, because it was the right organization of things. Because what I'd seen in that hospital room had clarified something I'd been trying not to see for years. When you want to know who loves you, get hurt. I came home in November. Gus came over with a casserole his wife had made, and he helped me navigate the front steps, and we sat in my kitchen, and I told him most of what I've just told you. He listened the way good people listen, without rushing toward solutions or reassurances, just letting the words land. "What are you going to tell Lorraine?" he asked. "The truth," I said. "When the time comes." The time came 3 weeks later. Lorraine called to say she and Holt wanted to come over for dinner, which was unusual. She rarely suggested things that involved cooking or effort on her end. I said yes. I made a simple dinner, set the table the way Patty taught me, put on coffee. They arrived together, which was also unusual. Holt shook my hand with his firm handshake and sat at the table and accepted coffee, and then, within 20 minutes, steered the conversation exactly where I knew it was going. "We've been thinking more about the house situation," he said. "Not Lorraine. Holt. And we wanted to lay out some options for you." He actually used the word options, a real estate man's word. I let him talk. He had clearly rehearsed this. There was a progression. The practicalities of maintaining a large property alone, the risks of another fall, the financial sense of liquidating real estate in a strong market, the flexibility a smaller space would offer. He made it sound almost charitable, as if selling my home was something he was offering to do for me. When he was finished, I refilled everyone's coffee. Then I said, "The house is in a trust." Holt's face did something complicated. "It was transferred about 6 weeks ago," I said. "They'll go to a community land trust after I'm gone. Sylvester handled everything." I said Sylvester's name deliberately. Holt knew who Sylvester was. He knew Sylvester was serious. "Dad," Lorraine said. She had gone pale. Why didn't you? I also updated my will," I said, "and the power of attorney. Sylvester can walk you through the details if you have questions." The kitchen was very quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car went past on Sycamore Road. Lorraine looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen on her face in a long time. Not anger, something younger than anger, something closer to being caught. "I was in the hospital for 4 days," I said. "You came on day 4. I'm not saying that to punish you. I'm saying it because it changed things for me. It showed me something I needed to see. I was going to come sooner." "I know," I said. "And I know you love me in your way. But love isn't just a feeling you have. It's a choice you make when it's inconvenient, when there's nothing to gain, when someone just needs you there." I thought of Ada, pulling up a chair without being asked. I thought of Gus and the pretzels. Some people in my life made that choice. I needed to adjust things accordingly. Holt left first, some excuse about parking. I didn't mind. I hadn't been talking to Holt. Lorraine stayed. She sat across from me at the kitchen table where she'd done homework as a child and eaten 10,000 meals, and where her mother had once helped her practice her wedding vows. "I didn't know it was that bad," she said finally. "The marriage, the money. I felt like I was trying to hold everything together, and I thought you were fine. You're always fine. I fell off a ladder." "I know. I wasn't fine." "I know," she said. And then, quieter, "I'm sorry, Dad." There it was. The thing I hadn't let myself need. I sat with it for a moment before I answered. "I know you are," I said. "I'm not trying to cut you out of my life, Lorraine. You're my daughter. You'll always be my daughter. But I'm 67 years old, and I might have another 20 years ahead of me if I'm careful and a little lucky, and I need those years to mean something. I need to know that the people around me are there because they want to be, not because of what they expect to get." She cried a little. I gave her a napkin. We're not a tissue family. We use napkins. And I let her cry. "What happens now?" she said. "Now you figure out your own situation with Holt," I said. "Get real help if you need it. A financial advisor, a counselor, whatever it takes. I'll help where I can. I'm not cutting you off. But I'm not the solution to your problems either, and I should have said that clearly a long time ago." I thought of what the nurse had told me about who shows up. "And when you can, you come over for dinner. Not to ask for anything, just for dinner, just to be here." She nodded. She stayed another hour. We talked about her kids, about Patty, about a trip Lorraine had taken in college that she'd never told me the full story of, something that had happened in Portugal that turned out to be funny in retrospect. We laughed, a little awkwardly at first, and then more easily. When she left, she hugged me at the door. Really hugged me, not the brief touch of shoulder to shoulder we'd been doing for years. "I'll come Thursday," she said. "For dinner, no agenda." "I'll make the chicken thing your mother used to like," I said. I want to be honest about something because I think the honest version is more useful than the tidy version. Lorraine did come Thursday. And the Thursday after, things are different between us. Not fixed, not the warm, easy relationship I might have wished for, but different, more real. There's less performance on both sides. She knows I see her clearly now, and something about being seen clearly, even when it's uncomfortable, seems to have made her try harder. Not for the house. Not for anything material. Just to show up. Holt is a separate story. I don't know how that marriage is going to go. That's not my problem to solve. I go to physical therapy twice a week. I walk with a cane, which I hated at first, and have made my peace with it, has a good solid weight to it, and I've started thinking of it as a tool rather than a concession. Gus and I play chess on Tuesday evenings, sometimes in person and sometimes over video call. Ada moved to the cardiac floor, but she sends me a note every few weeks, and I send a donation to the hospital foundation in her name. The house on Sycamore Road is mine. The gutters need cleaning. This fall, I'm going to hire someone to do it. Some lessons you only need to learn once. Patty used to say that the hardest thing about being a parent is staying a whole person while you're doing it. Not dissolving yourself so completely into the role that when the kids are grown, there's nothing of you left. I thought I understood what she meant when she said it. I don't think I really understood it until I was lying on my back in wet October grass thinking about whether the back door was locked, and realizing that the person I needed most in that moment was someone who would come not because I could give them something, but because they loved the man I actually was. I found a few of those people. I found out I had fewer than I thought, and more than I feared. That's the story. Make sure your gutters are clean before October, and if they're not, call someone. I've been thinking a lot lately about cause and effect. Not in a complicated way, just the plain observable kind, the kind you can see clearly when you stop making excuses for people and start paying attention to the pattern. When Penny was alive, she used to say that character isn't what someone does when things are easy. It's what they do when showing up costs them something. A Tuesday afternoon. A 12-minute drive. A little inconvenience. That's the test, not the big dramatic moments. Those are easy to perform. The real test is the small, unglamorous ones, the ones nobody photographs. I failed that test plenty of times in my own life. I was not always the father I should have been when Lorraine was young, and I was buried in work and deadlines and the particular self-importance of a man who thinks providing financially is the same as being present. I know that. I've sat with that knowledge for years, and it doesn't get lighter, but it does get clearer. What I understand now is that everything I received from Lorraine in that hospital room was, in some part, a return on what I had modeled. Not an excuse for her. She's an adult and her choices are her own, but cause and effect doesn't stop at the front door of a family home. It moves through kitchens and dinner tables and the silences between people who love each other imperfectly. The intellect I'm most proud of isn't the engineering degree or the career, it's the moment, lying in that hospital bed on day 4 when I chose to see clearly instead of making the comfortable excuses. It would have been so easy, so deeply human and understandable, to tell myself that Lorraine was just busy, that Holt was complicated, that things would sort themselves out. I'd been telling myself versions of that for years. It kept the peace, and it cost me the truth. What I did instead was think, carefully, without rage, without self-pity. I looked at what the evidence actually showed me, and I made decisions accordingly. That is the hardest kind of intelligence. Not the kind that solves abstract problems, but the kind that looks at your own life honestly and refuses to flinch. The resilience part came later. It came in physical therapy when my hip hurt, and I did the exercises anyway. It came when Lorraine sat at my kitchen table with that look on her face, and I said what I needed to say without cruelty and without collapse. It came every morning I woke up in the house on Sycamore Road and chose to build something with whatever time I have left, rather than spend it nursing a grievance. Ada never preached at me. Gus never gave speeches. They just showed up. That's the whole lesson, really, condensed to its smallest form. Show up. Not for what you'll get. Not strategically. Just show up because someone needs another person in the room. I'm still learning how to do that better. At 67, with a cane and a new will and a daughter who comes for dinner on Thursdays, I'm still learning. That's not a defeat. That's the whole point.